3 disturbing camping encounters caught on camera. 3 stories, 3 forests, and not one of them wanted their visitors to leave alive. They chose their targets long before the first footstep on the trail. There are places in the wild where daylight feels borrowed and darkness feels alive. Tonight you'll hear 3 stories of campers that might make you think twice before your next trip into the wild. 1. The Pinefall Watcher. The scariest part wasn't what followed me through the trees. It was what stood outside my door the night I finally heard it breathe. I'm 72 now, but this memory is carved into me like old names scratched into a tree. It was the winter of 1971 after my mother died and my life collapsed inward. I rented a cabin outside a tiny Pennsylvania town called Pinefall Ridge. 1 dirt road, endless spruce forest, no TV, a barely working landline. I wanted quiet. Quiet didn't want me. About a month in, a beagle mix wandered onto my porch and sat like she'd been waiting for me to arrive. Sweet little thing, stubborn. Slept by my bed every night, like she knew something in the woods watched us when we couldn't see it. Soon, I began sensing eyes at the windows, not glimpsing them, feeling them. A slow pressure at the back of my neck whenever I crossed the cabin. Sometimes the dog would lift her head and stare into the dark without making a sound. One night, walking a narrow trail to the only family living down the ridge, I heard footsteps pacing me in the trees, perfectly matched. Slow when I slowed, silent when I stopped. My brother heard it too, so did a friend. They refused to stay after sunset. Daytime hikes revealed crude camps scattered deep in the forest, bent cans, burnt stone circles. Old sheds with leaf piles shaped like makeshift beds. Someone had been surviving out there long before I arrived. The final month was when the pattern revealed itself. A dead sparrow appeared at the bottom of my steps. The next morning, a finch, then a squirrel, then a rabbit, all placed neatly like offerings. When the gifts became large animals, something tightened in my chest. Then came the night the beagle woke me. She stood frozen at the cabin door, shaking violently, staring at the thin screen, as if something stood inches from her. I stepped forward and heard heavy footsteps racing down the porch stairs and vanishing into the woods. Whoever had been there had been close enough to touch the handle. The next 2 mornings brought severed livestock legs, huge, bloody, one half skinned. I knew then that the forest was no longer watching. It was approaching. On my last day, the beagle followed a scent into the trees and never returned. I searched until nightfall. Nothing. A week later, safely back in the suburbs, I found a small newspaper piece about something locals were calling the Pinefall Watcher. A tall figure seen tailing hikers, staring through windows, leaving animal offerings. Everything it did to others, it had already done to me. And here is what keeps me up even now. If it was a man, he knew exactly where I lived. If it wasn't, then something else knew how to move like one. One question haunts me every time I think about that final night. What would have happened if I had opened the door before it ran? Sometimes I wonder where my beagle went that day. Then last month, I found her old collar hanging on a branch in the woods behind my house, even though I never brought it back with me. 2. The night at Deadwater campground. The moment I heard a man whisper through the tent wall, I knew we were not gonna survive if we stayed another minute. This happened in August of 2019 at a place called Deadwater Creek. My partner and I had gone for a weekend camping trip to celebrate our anniversary. The place was familiar, safe, or so we thought. Our first night, something big circled the tent. Heavy footsteps, slow, careful. We told ourselves it was just a deer. On the second night, we returned late after spending the day with my family. When we reached our campsite, the tent zipper was open. Inside, everything was disturbed. Sleeping bags thrown, clothes scattered, my bag emptied, a few things missing. We should have packed up. Instead, we told ourselves it was just kids. We made a fire and tried to settle in. Hot dogs, s'mores, a little celebrating. The forest around us felt unusually quiet. Too quiet. Around 9:30, we crawled into the tent and zipped it shut. As soon as the light flicked off, the noises returned. Footsteps. Not shuffling, not animal. Deliberate human footsteps circling us. Then came a whisper. A man's voice, low, raspy, right outside the nylon. We stared at each other in the dark. Then we heard a second voice. We were surrounded. My partner whispered that we should pretend to go to the bathroom. We rushed to put on our clothes. He turned on the little tent lantern, and that's when it happened. A voice spoke to us from inches away. "What are you doing?" The tone was mocking, confident, like he'd been waiting for us to react. We bolted. My partner grabbed his keys and his pocket knife. He yanked the zipper open and pulled me out. We sprinted through the dark toward the car with footsteps pounding behind us. The moment the car locks clicked, the footsteps veered off into the woods. We sat shaking, whispering plans, breaths loud in the silence. We drove back down to the site, grabbed everything and stuffed it into the trunk. Tent still assembled, chairs still open. We packed in 5 minutes that felt like a lifetime. On the way out, I jumped out to rip our name tag off the campsite post, and that is when I saw them. 2 men stepping from the trees, one in hunting camo, one in a militia shirt, both holding large, unsheathed knives. The man in camo smiled at me, slow, like he already knew how the night would end. We took back roads the whole way home. Every turn, every shadow in the rear view felt like someone following. We told my dad. He called us paranoid. But I know what we heard. I know what we saw. And I know those men had been watching us long before we ever noticed the whispers. Sometimes I dream about that smile, that slow, crooked smile in the dark pines. And every time I wake up, I have the same question gnawing at me. What would he have done if we hadn't ran fast enough? Last winter, I pulled the old tent out of storage. There were thin, curved slices in the fabric, perfect circles around where our heads used to rest. 3. The shadows of Pinefall Ridge. You do not know real fear until you hear metal trace the outline of your body through a thin sheet of fabric. Slowly, deliberately, like they are choosing where to cut first. A few years ago, my girlfriend and I decided to tackle a long, remote stretch of the Pinefall Ridge Trail, 150 miles through untouched forest between Cold River Gap and a tiny mountain town called Brindle Hollow. Hardly anyone hikes that far in, which is exactly why we chose it. The first few days were peaceful, cool October air, red gold leaves, the kind of quiet that feels ancient. On the 4th night, we ignored the designated shelters and cut off trail in a small clearing. Perfect flat ground, no other hikers, no one to stumble on us in the dark, or so we thought. Around 2 a.m, my girlfriend shook me awake, whispering that someone was scraping something sharp along the outside of the tent. I always carry a Judge revolver and a backup when hiking. I grabbed the Judge and listened. For a few minutes, there was nothing. Then in the trees behind us, snap, crunch, snap. I crawled out of the tent silently. The fire was dead and the moon barely lit anything. I waited, listened. Then another crack. The steps were spaced like a person walking, not an animal. I switched on my flashlight and swept the trees. A shadow moved behind a trunk. I yelled that I was armed and saw something dart off to my right. I spun. Another figure tore through the woods behind me. Then silence. I sat outside guarding until sunrise. In the morning, I found a clear boot print in wet dirt. Not mine, not hers. I kept it to myself. We were too deep in to turn around. By nightfall, the feeling of being followed had grown thick enough to taste. We camped under a rock overhang near a cliff so nothing could circle behind us. My girlfriend held the 1911. I kept the judge on my chest. At some point, exhaustion hit me and I passed out. I woke up to the sound of bags being rummaged through outside. Someone was going through our gear. A dark silhouette moved against the tent wall. I yelled that we were armed, and they bolted. I burst out to see our things scattered everywhere. I followed the noise to the creek and saw a flickering lantern light down the trail. Then 3 more lights appeared from the opposite side. We packed only what mattered and left everything else. As we headed back to the main trail, I kept hearing voices drifting through the trees, branches snapping, leaves moving in ways they should not. I checked behind us every few steps. Just before dawn, I saw a figure stepping onto the trail behind us, a perfect silhouette, not moving, just staring. I shouted and demanded to know what they wanted. They stood still for a moment, then slowly turned and walked back into the forest without a word. We never saw them again, but the feeling of being watched stayed with us the entire final stretch. By the time we reached the car, we were exhausted, shaking, and convinced that if we had camped one more night, something terrible would have happened. I still don't know who they were or how many, or what they wanted out there so far from any town. All I know is that I'll never set foot on Fern Ridge again. Some nights, I still dream about those lanterns, except in my dreams there's a 5th one, closer, brighter, and swinging right outside my window.